Welcome to the Curiosity Connection podcast. I'm your host, Na. Today's guest is Italo. It's one of my daughter's friend's dad. We connected at the TFC, I think the final game last year.
Yeah.
We had a really good chat regarding just Ted Lasso, soccer culture. I've been interviewing a lot of Europeans, so I had to say football. And I'm like, okay, you're the first person I had to say soccer.
Oh,
so
no, football.
do
Like,
you go by football or soccer in
well,
Peru?
In Peru, it's football.
Really?
Yeah. I
So
think
good.
soccer is a very North American.
Really? Okay, that's good to know because I didn't know that because I was just like, know your audience, but at the same time, I just assume North America and South America, we go to soccer, right?
Oh, no, yeah. In South America, I didn't even know the word soccer until I immigrated to Canada, to be honest.
Oh, wow,
Yeah,
that's fascinating.
it
Okay.
was, always football. But thanks for having me on.
No problem. Today's episode, we're continuing on the FIFA World Cup 2026 that's being hosted in North America. And this part of the world, we're going to head to Peru and get Idolo's take on football culture. So
Yeah.
let's segue into it. When did you get exposed to that culture and how young?
I think football is actually embedded in our culture. It's not like, I think when you think about soccer in North America, like there's a soccer subculture where you have some people that are into soccer.
Yes.
Whereas in Peru, it's embedded in
fabric of life.
Yeah, it's our everyday life. I mean, my earliest memories of like being 5, 6 years old, like I remember the first time I went to a stadium at 6 years old very vividly. Like
Who took you to the football game?
the first one ever was my dad. In Peru or in Lima in particular, there's two main teams. And it's kind of ingrained in your DNA which team you kind of go towards.
And which team? Where are the
so
two teams?
there's two teams. One is called Lau, and one is called Alianza Lima. So those are the two main teams. One is like blue and white. The other one is like a peach cream color. So you're one or the other.
Are both those teams like? Did they start off like around the same time, or did one come after the other? How long have they been in existence?
I actually don't know. I think they've celebrated over 100 years at this point,
Wow.
both teams equally. And there's other teams that are, risen to popularity, but these are kind of the two main staples. And when I was a child, my cousin actually happened to play for the blue and white team. Yeah. So
you play pro.
So yeah, I had a pro player in my family. So it was kind of,
Was it a big deal? Like,
it was, I mean, I was too young to know how big of a deal it was,
how
but
old
it
was he? And how old were you when you
so
realized?
there's a whole crazy story to this.
Okay,
I don't know if you're ready for this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ready.
Okay. This will be a side tangent, but
That's okay.
he was a pro player. This is like a Lima like story. Like everybody knows this. If you grew up in Lima,
Lima
you know
heritage,
this.
yeah.
Their plane actually went down in '87. So every player on the blue and white team perished, including my cousin.
Yeah.
So that was like a huge, like, like that was a shock to the culture. Because imagine like one of like the best comparison I can make is if the Blue Jays all of a sudden vanished. You know what I mean? So like it was a big deal.
Yeah,
because
it's part of the backbone culture.
Yeah. I remember like not so much the event, because the event, I'm sure my parents sheltered me from like the whole like grieving part of it. But the fallout of that was, I remember the first game back after the whole team perished and they had a whole new team that they had to field. So this is the first kind of return match between the two teams. Everybody, including the fans of the other team, were kind of supporting the the blue and white, like an honorary thing. All of your
collective.
Yeah, it was like a community thing. That's the first time I can remember thinking like, this is beyond just like, I didn't really understand that. Well, why are they supporting this team when they're like,
so was that the first game you went to? Was
no, it
the
wasn't
post?
No, it's the first game I remember like watching collectively, like where like the whole country paused and like just kind of stopped to watch. It was, it was a big deal. This is where my villain curve begins. Even though it was ingrained in my DNA and I should have been a blue and white, my cousin played for the team, he perished and all of this stuff. I remember watching the game and I just liked the other team's style of play. And I remember like the blue and white scored, and I remember going through the motions of cheering.
Help me understand,
Yeah.
the listener understand. It sounds like a legacy thing. So was your dad and your other family member, did they always stick to like your cousin's team and it was required?
It was kind of like, so that was on my mom's side of the family. My dad was actually from a very small city in Peru called Arequipa. they had their own team. My dad was actually from like one of the side teams that didn't really matter, to be honest. Like they were so low on the table that they were kind of irrelevant to the whole scheme of things. But he was loyal. My dad was always very loyal to like
Yeah.
everything, so like that was kind of his thing. So he was kind of impartial. He
Yeah.
didn't really get too much
So
into it.
you were
Right now,
heavily
like
influenced
mom's
by your
side.
mom's side.
Oh yeah, my mom's side was like very heavy into it.
So this was your maternal cousin then that perished?
Yes, yeah.
How old was he and what was his name?
His name was they always called him by last name. His name was Alfredo Tomasini,
Mhm.
and I think he would have been in his early 20s. Like
Oh,
the
wow.
whole team was very young. Like it was a really like a
A
national treasure.
national.
I remember though when the other team scored, the peach and cream team. The whole family was like, no. Like, I was like,
You're like,
yes. And that was my deal. They were all like, what are you doing? And like, I like this team. And like, I started learning all the players' names. That was the beginning
but
of
what was it about the
the
other cheese that you enjoyed
so
more than your default
and
mom's cheese?
and sometimes it's it can as a kid like it can be the littlest things and like I think it was like one little flair. I can't remember the exact
Yeah.
logic of it, but
You were just
it's
drawn
like a
in
little
by
like
it.
flair style of play, and it was like, oh,
Yeah.
these guys are really good. Now, keep in mind, the other team hadn't fielded before. They were a brand new team,
Mm.
so they were probably a little bit lesser than
Yes.
the quality that
Right.
that they were used to. Well, the other team that I got drawn onto, they showed their flair and they showed it good. And
Yeah.
I don't even remember the outcome of the game, but
Did
like,
you tell anyone after the
oh
fact?
yeah. Like I remember, and there was a whole other side of the family on my mom's side that was actually gravitating in that direction. They were already like, so my cousin was
So
like
they're
already
openly having dialogue about his
oh yeah,
favorite
yeah,
of the
yeah.
other team.
So they were already on that side of the shop, and I was like, that's it. Like I remember from that day on, it was over. Like I had my jersey, and like because my dad wasn't partial, he didn't care. He bought into it, so he would take
Yeah.
me to the game. He would be equally into like my team.
Yeah.
It eventually became his team too, out of like
Yeah.
bonding. But I'm still a fan of that team, by the way.
Oh,
Like
wow.
it's how ingrained it is. Like it's once you choose a side, that's it. Like it would be very difficult to like
So
jump
so go
spectrum.
from that to your first experience in a stadium game. Like, what's the
Mm.
average number of attendees?
Geez, I don't know exactly, but if I had to guess, like just I'd say probably in 45,000 range,
Yeah.
somewhere between like similar to what the Rogers
Right.
Center hold, I believe.
And how was the experience in a collective, like a stadium setting?
I remember being nervous. It was like almost like a nervous anticipation, like, oh my God, if my team
Mm.
scores, I don't know what my
Mm.
physical reaction to this will be.
Yes.
Like, am I gonna cry? Am I gonna,
Yeah.
like want to jump up and down? I remember it happened and I
Mm.
still didn't know what to do with myself when it happened. But it was very exciting. Like I think once you get a taste of it, it's very difficult. Like that was it. That was like my addiction. It became like just watching the games, going to the games. My grandfather, again, he didn't gravitate specifically to one team, but he would
Mhm.
take me to cool events. So, for example, when they were having like a South American final, and it was between like the national team and I got really into the national. I mean,
Right.
Peru, we haven't had the best national team. I think it's similar to Canada, like a bit of an underdog.
Right.
Um, South America is absolutely stocked with like Brazil,
Yes.
Argentina, like
Yes.
Uruguay, like teams that are worldwide
Caliber, yeah.
caliber, and we never stacked very good. So we always had that underdog feel to it. And so when
Mm.
we would win, it's a
It's a
much
big
bigger
deal.
deal than
Yes.
like when Brazil wins every
Yeah.
match pretty much.
Yeah.
So like it's not as big of a deal. But I remember like watching us win against Chile, and that's like they call it like the
In the South American Cup?
yeah, 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 and it wasn't no, I think this was for a World Cup qualifier.
Mhm.
I don't remember but that was the first national team game I saw, and we actually
Mm.
won that
How
match.
old were you when you watched that?
Maybe like 7 or 8.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
and like I still remember the goal scorers. Like it's crazy like what memories you retain, but
Yes, yes.
it's a very addictive experience. Like all you want, and it wasn't a unique experience for me. Like I feel that every child my age was equally obsessed, and I can't remember doing anything else other than like it was school, get dressed for soccer, and go outside and play soccer, and that was the daily lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how did you get into playing soccer? Was it something that you requested, "I wanna do this," or like you said, going back to what you said earlier, it's so part of the fabric of life that did your mom or your dad say, "We're gonna put you into soccer?" I mean, football.
And it's okay if you call it soccer, but I think it's one of those things where the school itself, I was on my school teams, and then
So the
like
school does have organized sports that
yeah,
you had.
but it's much more uniform. Like it
Mm.
got very competitive. Like the way that I think, and I don't know if it still works this way now, but like the schools themselves are the academies that like so for example, like
Oh, they're affiliated with the
yeah, so
team.
school would have a competitive team where like the better players that would go through the youth system would eventually
Mm.
graduate and be on the adult team. I remember being I was good enough when I
Did the thought
early
cross your
grades.
mind even that young that I wanna go
Oh,
pro?
yeah. Yeah, yeah. It was kinda cool that we had one of the kids my age was actually the son of the national team coach.
Oh, wow.
There was high expectations, I remember, from him specifically, so he was kinda like the
Yeah.
kid to watch for, and I remember him being good, but he wasn't that much better than I was, so I
Yeah.
remember he was kinda like my benchmark. It was, I mean, I can
But how
probably
do you
admit it now, it was a little bit of a
but
jealousy
when you
thing
go
too.
into teams like that, this is a question I didn't get to cover with the other guest was, do you decide which position you play, or is there a position you're gravitating towards, or the coach saw your potential and said, "No, this is the position you're gonna play," and did you stick to that position as you grew older in the sports?
Interesting. I don't think they actually had any it was kind of rotational at that age. It didn't matter.
Mm.
I mean, I think the first exposure you have to like an actual like this is what you're good at in your position didn't come till I was in about so I immigrated to Canada in grade 5 or 6, like in
Mm.
between. And that's when it was starting to get a little bit more serious and organized, where you had a set position and they were starting to identify like who doesn't make the team
Mhm.
because like in the earlier grades, like everybody kind of makes the team, and they obviously have like people that they keep on the field a little bit longer than others.
But the experience going back to, like, when you were in Lima with an academy level, did that ever cross your mind, like, "Okay, that we're a highly affiliated school, that gets, umbrella into feeder into, like, potential pro, versus coming here to Canada,
Yeah.
where it's such a different system where you don't have did that mentality still stick with you? Like, "I wanna carry on that the dream of going pro still," or you just came to a realization that that's not happening here in
Yeah,
Canada?
like, when I came here, it wasn't even like it was now, like, soccer was not a popular thing, like, I remember, like, when I first came and, like, barely spoke English, like, even when my school would have, like, the house league soccer or,
Mhm.
like, it wasn't nearly the
The
competitive level I
caliber,
was
yeah.
used to. I mean, I was definitely like, I knew what I was doing, even if I wasn't necessarily the best skilled, I had the most structure to my game. Like I knew what I was
Mm.
doing more so in like terms of positioning and you know what to do off the ball. Like a lot of the things that were missing in the
Did you
everyday
go into
game.
comparative mode?
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
"Oh," or did you ever say, like, "These kids don't know what they're doing?" Did you get, like, really annoyed at that aspect where you were just, like, are you accepting of, this is the nature of this environment compared to where you came from?
I think it would have been a huge shock to me if I didn't immediately love baseball. So this is yeah, baseball
Is
helps.
baseball big in Peru too?
No, I had never even, I'd never played baseball in my life. I came in 91, so that's important because that's when
That
Blue
was
Jays
the
fever
yes.
was like at peak, right? So
Yes.
I got sucked into it immediately. I realized at that point it's more so like as much, as I love soccer and as passionate as I am about soccer to this day, I think at that point I realized maybe it's more of a sports thing. I love the concept of sports and like a team and like the city rooting for a team.
Mm.
And what was different about baseball, it was so keep in mind I came from a place that was two main teams and like
Yes.
several other sub teams.
Yeah.
Toronto only had the Blue Jays.
Yes.
So it's a whole city behind one team. I
Yes.
really liked that actually. So
Yeah.
like it was a
You didn't have to choose.
yeah, there was no choosing. It was pretty much, I came into
Yes,
this
we're on the
world as
same
a Blue
level,
Jay fan.
yeah.
So I picked up baseball right away. Like
Right.
that was like a day one thing.
But did you still continue with soccer on the side, or you just kinda wean yourself out of it?
There wasn't really like a platform other than like street soccer and like playing with friends that I
Or
met.
house league, like youth
Yeah,
league,
like
yeah.
house leagues and stuff like that. In high school, I started playing again, like on my school team a bit, but like the level, I lost interest a little bit to be honest, because the level it wasn't the same, and not that the teams weren't good, and not that the players weren't good. It wasn't taken as seriously as there wasn't like a expectation that like, hey, the best players from here are going to go on to play professional for your,
Mm.
represent your school or
Yes.
represent your team.
Yeah.
There was no concept of that, right? So
Right.
like it was like if you're good, that's- what
Yeah.
then, right? So like I then think I took a little bit more of a active interest in baseball, because that was kind of I think I just want to be in sports. Kind of, took to hockey and baseball. I couldn't skate if my life depended on
But
me.
even with all the sports that you were getting curious about and committing to or exploring, did you and your mom and your dad still retain that loyalty to the Lima team?
Yeah, so I mean, I think from my mom and dad's side, they kind of, they weren't actively interested in it. I was listening, so at the time, you could get a little bit of, actually, it wasn't until like mid '90s until the internet started streaming. Like, I don't know if you remember Real Audio. This was like, it was like one of the first like very low quality streams, but it was
Mm.
around in like 95, 96. So I was an early internet adopter, call it.
Mm.
And they started, like, you could find the feed from the games. So I started listening to the games. You couldn't watch them here because there's
Right.
no way to really watch. Whenever I'd visit, I would still be it was like I went right back into, the
Yeah.
mode, like playing and like, watching the games. My very first return back to Peru, I went to the stadium on that return back, and it was like,
Oh.
I think I would have been like 12.
Did the feelings still feel as familiar and exciting, or
More.
was it more?
'Cause you
Why?
missed it. Like, I didn't
Ah.
have it here, and, like, as exciting as, like, going to the Blue Jays game was, so there's a very big difference between going to, and I think to this day it still exists, like, when you go to a Blue Jays game or, like, a hockey game, you chant when the horn or the organ tells you to
Mm.
chant. There, it's just like you chant
Nonstop.
because, like, it just needs to get out. Like
Yeah.
it's overwhelming you. You wanna
Yeah.
scream, you wanna shout, you wanna
Yes.
dance. Like, it's and it went right back into that mode,
Yeah.
almost seamlessly. I mean, to this day, I kind of feel that way when I go to a soccer stadium. Like,
Have they ever, like, the Peruvian team, I mean, Lima was one thing. Did you ever gravitated to any of the teams outside of Lima or in Peru?
yeah, I mean, yes and no. Like, I was very loyal to my team, but, and I couldn't tell you when this happened. Let's say maybe I'll put it 98, 99. We did watch this on TV. One of the Peruvian teams went on to qualify for like the South American final. And that was a big deal because, Peruvian teams were generally the underdogs
Yeah.
and they won. And that was a huge deal,
Yeah.
like to all of Peru to have a team represented. It was a team from Cusco, which is where Machu Picchu is located. So,
Mm.
like, they're not known for their soccer culture.
Yeah.
And that was a huge deal. That kind of put that awoke people a little bit to like, hey,
Yeah.
Peru's kind of
Yeah.
good, and they actually hit a bit of the Peru national team hit a bit of a good stride between, let's call it a couple of years later. They kind of peaked in like 2018, 2020, but they're gradually on a downward slope right now. But it hit a really big peak, and I think that kind of brought, I guess all Peruvians had like soccer fever for a while. There's
Mm.
actually a huge Peruvian community here in Canada.
Yes, like St. Clair is a huge
Yeah.
Peruvian.
Well, we shut down St. Clair when they qualified for the
Oh,
World Cup in
wow.
2018, and I was, not ashamed to admit it. I
Yeah.
was in the middle of St. Clair there,
Yeah.
blocking the road with
That's
everybody else. Yeah,
hilarious. But did
yeah.
they ever travel? Like, cause I know when I was talking to one of the friend who's a big, like, Manchester United, and, he got to watch the game in, the UK, but he said they also did tours.
Mhm.
So did Peru, or Lima, their teams have, like, tours where they would, do, like, games in North America just as, like, to advertise? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Not the team from Lima.
But the Peruvian team, like, against Canada or
Yes,
others?
so Peru played here against Canada in 2011. That was pretty cool. I went to the game. It was it's when we bought tickets, I was a little bit conflicted because I'm actually a huge Canada supporter as well.
Mm.
But
Where was it?
BMO.
No.
Yeah, they had about, and BMO couldn't seat more than, like, I think at the time it was like a 15,000
It's
seater. It
still,
was
yeah,
before
it's
they
like,
had before they even had like the second level.
yeah,
So I
after
don't
the renovation, the first
yeah.
round of renovation.
So we bought tickets in the Peru supporter section, which we assumed to be at the top, like it was supposed to be a top corner. And when we got to the stadium, they had a desk set up where they upgraded our tickets. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool, but I want to be in the Peruvian supporter section. And the person working the door just kind of laughed it off and said, You'll understand when you get in." When I got in, there was a Canadian supporter section at the very top, and the entire stadium was Peruvian. And I hadn't seen that before. Like, I hadn't seen that many Peruvians eat there. So, like,
Yeah.
that was kind of a, hey, we're here. Like I didn't even
Yes.
realize there was such a big Peruvian community
Yes.
until that day, to be honest. But that was a very cool experience seeing them outside of outside of the ecosystem of
But
Peru.
have you watched, like, obviously Canada, Peru, but have you watched a game where it's just, like, Canada, not Peruvian? And how does the atmosphere of the Canadian audience or the cheer, the supporting fan versus, like, when you were watching? Because I my experience is because when we went to the Tunisia,
Yeah,
Canada game, I didn't know what I was expecting, so I was sitting there and 3/4 of the stadium was all Tunisian fan,
yeah,
and a quarter was Canadian fan, and we were in the Canadian, I guess we were the only one, and then there was, like, a Tunisian fan, and you could tell, like, the atmosphere, like, they were just so they were like what you were describing, they were just cheering constantly rather than when the horn came on,
yeah,
right? And I was just like, "Wow, it's just this huge contrast between a cultural team versus, like, a Canadian team."
yeah. I mean, I hope so. Pivot now to Canada because I'm a huge Canada supporter,
Mm,
and like we actually went to the Qatar World Cup
mm,
with Team Canada as like part of the supporter group, and there was definitely a different vibe in Qatar. So in Qatar, for example, when we played, I think the opening match was against Belgium,
mm.
and 90% of the stadium was Canadian.
Really?
Yeah, that was really cool because like the chants for Canada were like we were overwhelming the Belgian fans.
Mm.
We didn't win that match, but it felt there was kind of going into that match, there was not very much a sense of belief that this team could stack up against the world's best.
Yes.
Belgium was the number 2 rated team at the time, so that really got
So
like
it
a
was like an
little
underdog
yeah,
David Goliath
it
story,
was
yeah.
really cool. I mean, you know, as passionate as I am about like, the Peruvian team, I think I'm now equally passionate about the Canadian team. Like when we
Mm.
were there for Alfonso Davies scoring against Croatia, Canada's first goal in the World Cup,
Yeah.
I cried. Like that made, like it was who's cutting onions type. I'm glad I had my sunglasses on at the time. It was yeah, it was like a very
So at what point
overwhelming
did you
experience.
start to, commit interest to Team Canada?
I don't know if I can pinpoint it exactly, but like when they were, I've attended a few matches before they started the realistic traction of trying to qualify for the previous World Cup.
Right.
I think there was a shift and I don't know if anybody else mentioned this, but like I don't know how many other Canadian fans feel about this, but the second Alfonso Davies, there was a match, and I can't remember the exact team. I think it might have been El Salvador,
Mm.
where they were down
Mm.
and it was a loss. And they were, they were assumed to be out of the World Cup because it's Canada and we've
Mm.
never really, we made it one time prior. And Alfonso Davies made a run from, our own half all the way down. It was an incredible run
Right.
leading to a goal. And I couldn't even tell you the outcome of that game. Like, I don't know if they tied it or they won the game. I think they actually ended up winning that one. That shifted. There was a shift there in momentum in which like, oh my
Mm.
God, this team has a
Potential,
possibility to
yeah.
qualify. That match onwards, I attended every Canada match.
Mm.
When they played against the US, they played in Hamilton, and that
Mhm.
was for a World Cup qualifier. That match, we ended up beating the States 3-0, I think,
Mhm.
or 3-1. There was again like a complete shift. Like the fans were 100%
Right behind it,
believing, and
yeah.
there was a sense of like, oh, this is happening.
Yeah.
When the next match after that, I think was against Jamaica, where it was the do or die. Like this is it. Like we would qualify. So watching the Canadian team qualify and like just having the crowd behind them, like at that moment, I'm like, I'm gonna go to Qatar. Like
That was my next
yeah,
question. I
this is
want to
like
know, like, what prompted you to go to Qatar? Because this is like, you we had this discussion
yeah,
where I went, like, it was, like, post-COVID, but the restriction was still being implemented.
yeah,
I went to Qatar because my friend was living there, and I had seen it before, this is, like, a month before the World Cup, all the fans and the sports team started rolling in. So I saw it before the peak, but you went at the peak of the game.
yeah.
So what was it? You said the game against the US that prompted you to, like, "Let's go to Qatar and see?"
So I remember jokingly posting on Facebook
Mm.
saying, "That's it. I'm going to Qatar." Like
Yeah.
it started off as I think at the time in my brain I was still joking. There was,
Mm.
like but there was two things at play. In 2018 Peru made the World Cup, so the
Mhm.
previous one in Russia. It didn't even cross my mind to go to Russia, but
Right.
the so at this point, the Canadian team was qualified. They were going to Qatar.
Mhm.
When backtrack a little bit, I'm a
Mhm.
huge TFC fan,
Yeah.
and they were playing against Orlando here. The Orlando goalkeeper is the Peruvian national
The game we went to,
keeper.
yeah.
Yeah, I
It was
think
the
so.
final game because
So
you were telling me how you're a big
yeah,
fan of the
yeah.
goalie because he's Peruvian.
So this, oh my gosh, I can't remember the, yeah, it's full circle. So the previous, that same matchup, 4 years prior, that's the Peruvian keeper at his peak. The
Mm.
match you saw, Matt, wasn't exactly his
I know,
peak.
you were telling me this is not his norm. There's
Yeah, yeah,
something,
yeah.
like, an anomaly happening there.
But he was a national hero because he, for those Gallesa, he's one of our. I don't think Peru's ever had a keeper like him. We waited, so Jesse and I waited for him outside the stadium. Jesse must have been too young to care at the time, I think. As he was coming out, like there was a bunch of Peruvians gathered, and we all had the flags, and he was like, taking pictures with all of us. He signed, Jesse's jersey,
Yeah.
and kind of made a joking pact with the Peruvians outside and the keepers, like, you go to Qatar, we're going to Qatar. And at the time, I think it kind of dawned on me, oh my gosh, I am never going to see the possibility of Peru and Canada in the same World Cup.
Yeah.
I got to do this.
Yes.
Long story short, Peru got eliminated in the playoff leading to the World Cup. So
Mm.
they didn't. It was no longer a realistic outcome at the time. So I posted on Facebook because I assumed to me it was in the bag.
Right.
Posted on Facebook. A buddy of mine that I've known for a long time replied back and says, "You remember I live in Qatar, right? So if you guys want to make this happen, there's a place for you here."
Yeah.
I remember, at the time, my wife and I talked it over. And like, this is possible. Like we had looked into flights, a little bit of a tentative, like, is this even feasible? And looking at it, it was like, this is feasible, especially with accommodations not
Mhm.
being an issue.
Yeah.
And when are we ever going to go to Qatar? We
Or a
ended up,
World Cup.
I know. Anyways, long story short, we had bid for Peru and Canada tickets. We got them both. Peru ended up getting eliminated anyway. But at that point, we were all in. Like at that point, it was like, okay, you know what? Like this is now more of I'm still all in for Canada.
Yeah.
We bought him another handful of matches that were just cool matches to see. Like we
Yeah.
got to see Ronaldo, we got to see Messi, we got to
Yeah.
see Mbappe. So it was really cool.
Before we continue, let's backtrack. Is your partner and your son a big football soccer fan, or are they more of like this? Dad's interested in this. He's interested in this. We're just gonna support his interests. Did they
So,
get into it because of you?
I mean, much like it was ingrained in my DNA for Jesse, my son, it was ingrained in his DNA. Like
Mm.
there was, he's kicked the ball from the time that he was 2 years old, and he was in little kickers, and like he very much actively plays soccer in a team. Jesse is actually way better than I ever was at his age. So he's actually got potential. I mean, looking back now at comparing skill level, and I feel like skills also evolve over time. Like
Yes.
not just, not just over, you know, there's new tricks and new
Right. The
techniques that,
interests and
yeah,
yeah.
that's also evolved. But he's better than I ever was at the sport, and he's very serious about it. I would never push him in one direction or another to go pro or anything like that. He's also very good at baseball. So he's also kind of
Yeah.
having a similar, I guess, dilemma to what I had growing up, where he
But
loves
that's great
sports and
though.
yeah,
It's like you're not obligating your son to just like one lane. You know what I mean? You're allowing him to get curious with like whatever interests him at the same time, and it's a collaborative effort. You're not imposing that just because dad did this, like you have to do it. It's
yeah.
like, do you want to do it? If you do, then we'll find a way to support you. You know?
I mean, he's very much into it, and we watch soccer. So I haven't gotten to Chelsea Football Club yet, but we are massive Chelsea Football Club fans.
Okay, let's
So
go into that.
you want to go
But your
into that?
partner, like, how did she get
So
on board?
Um, Samantha, my wife, is an adventurer. Like, so she's in for the adventure. She may not be as passionate about like soccer,
Mhm.
the sport in particular. She is into experiences, like experiencing
Mm.
something new and like,
Yes.
going to, so her part of the trip or where we collaborated on like, hey, let's make this an epic experience. It's like, let's go to Dubai first.
Mm.
Let's go to the Atlantis water park. Let's
Yeah.
make that an adventure, and then we'll go to Qatar from there,
Yeah.
and then we'll do all of these like. So she's more of the, hey, let's do the adventure. I'm more
Yeah.
like, let's go to the match while we're in the adventure.
Ooh.
I think we balance each other
Yeah.
out. Otherwise, this would have turned into like everyday soccer activity.
Yes.
But since it was very much a collaboration on like, what does each day of this
Mm.
trip kind of look like, and then let's make it happen. We were there for a long time too, so like it wouldn't have been sustainable to just make it a soccer trip. Like we
But
need
did
to balance
going
it.
into Qatar, with everything that was happening, like, what was your expectation of that trip? Your thought of the country and your experience there, your own experience, but your son and your wife's experience, and afterwards, like walk us through that.
I don't know if I had any expectations in terms of like the um Team Canada, but like I didn't think they were gonna be making it too far. Like I think we we would have been really happy to see them win a match, I think.
Mhm.
But that was kind of where we had set our expectations, like Canada wise. In terms of the matches, like I think we got everything. Like, I was hoping to see, I think all three of us were hoping to see Messi, Ronaldo, but we actually saw Messi score, Ronaldo score, Mbappe score. So like it
So those are
exceeded.
individual games?
Yeah, so we had seen, for example, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, France, Australia,
But when
Portugal,
like,
Ghana.
so initially your plan was to go to Qatar, Doha. You had tickets lined up for the
Mhm.
Canada game, not thinking anything outside of, like, how they were gonna advance or not advance.
Yeah.
But you had no plan of, like, any other teams to intentionally watch. You was just feeling it out there and just deciding last minute, or
I mean, we had secured the Canada tickets,
Mhm,
and before we ever left for the trip, we were gonna try to find some other cool matches to attend. So,
mhm.
Argentina, Saudi Arabia, unfortunately, I couldn't get the whole family tickets. It's just me and my friend
But
who lives there.
how much was the Canada ticket prior to how long in advance,
Yeah.
the cost? Was it just for one person or just a family of
There's a family, and I mean, when you look at it in the context of what a current ticket is compared to the World Cup in Toronto, put it this way, one ticket for one match in this current World Cup. So we are going to be attending one of the matches in BC,
Mhm.
and the collective cost of us traveling to Vancouver, attending one match, and accommodations exceeds probably our entire Qatar allocation. So I
Oh,
think the
wow.
tickets for 3 matches in Qatar for Team Canada were probably in the 300 range for all
Yeah,
3 of us.
yeah,
And I mean, like, for all the
yeah.
matches. So it worked out to be about $100 per
It was
ticket.
pretty quickly accessible. It wasn't like
Yeah,
you had to,
yeah.
like, go to scout level.
Pretty accessible. I think the most expensive ticket that and again, like, we didn't opt for the whole family to do this because it was really expensive and we could only acquire 1 ticket. But the Messi game was the most
Mm,
sought after game, and I think I paid $500. So I
mm.
mean, like that would be considered a cheap ticket
Yeah,
for
even for
Canada here.
yeah, the
Um,
North American
yeah,
is just absurd.
I think what made Doha really special though is you could the country's Qatar is so small. You can travel from one end of Doha
Yeah.
to the other. Where the way that the North American World Cup is set up, you can't. It's not really feasible to attend multiple match
Mhm.
locations. Like you're kind of set up to attend maybe 2 matches if you're lucky, but it's not sustainable to really attend a whole series. Where I think the way that Qatar set it up, or FIFA set up Qatar, was you could attend multiple matches. We actually ended up attending, like, I think on the same day where I attended, we had a match earlier in the day, and I think it was Canada, Croatia, and then later that night we had France, Australia. So,
Mm.
and it was feasible to do
Was it in
both.
the same stadium or
No, different stadiums, but you could travel. I mean, I think there was I think from one end of Qatar to the other, it's about 2 hour. It's 2 hour train ride. So it was
Yeah,
very doable
yeah.
in,
And how was the atmosphere? Obviously Canada, Croatia was a different vibe versus the
yeah.
second a team or game that you watched that night. Which team were playing?
So I think we watched, the second match we attended was France, Australia. We very much went as some of my favorite players play on Team France, even though I'm not, I don't consider myself a France
Mhm.
supporter in any way, but Claude Giroux was there. Sorry, Claude?
Was it packed?
Olivia's
Both games? Or
um, absolutely sold out. There was not a seat in the house, and I think Qatar got a reputation for having undersold, but I didn't observe that at all. Like I think all matches were very well attended. The vibes were very, what I would expect. They were very lively. Everybody was chanting. Like it was still football culture. I think the difference though between, for example, attending a match in North America, whereas attending a match there's no alcohol. So like I didn't hate that. Like you didn't have like
it
the
didn't affect the
I don't think
audience
so.
either?
I attended an England match by myself, England against Senegal. And I sat in both sections purposely. So I went and first sat in the English section. And I think the England fans were really disappointed, probably most so out of any other teams, that there was no alcohol sales.
Yes.
They were a little tame. And so like I purposely, I'm like, I'm gonna go explore the other side with Senegal. And Senegal were down by so much, and they had a full horn section dancing.
They're
So
so
I had a
lively.
blast. Yeah, I had a blast sitting in the Senegal
Alcohol's a
section.
motivation for a
Yeah,
charity.
so I mean, it wasn't missed for example on the Senegal side. I think it
Yeah.
was missed on like the England side. So it was
Yeah.
kind of interesting to see like where it impacted. But I think it got what you observed on TV, where like the ticket sales and the vibe wasn't there. I didn't observe that at all. Like
Yeah.
I was very much impressed with
Yeah.
how the tournament ran, the outcome, and
And
everything.
how did your son and your wife experience the game? Like, because they've gone to games here in at BMO Field versus, going there where obviously they're different caliber. You're talking about like World Cup level
Yeah.
versus home field game, right?
I think for my wife, it was probably some of her. She's been to matches before.
Mm.
I mean, we've been together for 23 years at this point. So
Mm.
in that lifetime, she knows, that I'm very passionate about the sport. So she's gone to a handful of games, but I don't
Yeah.
think any of us were really like, this was a spectacle. This wasn't just a match. This was like, like they're doing whole ceremonies. You're there
Yeah.
knowing that millions of people are watching on TV, and you're in a world spectacle. Whereas like when
Yes.
you're watching locally here,
Yeah.
you know, let's
It's
face it,
different.
nobody's watching TFC globally, and nobody's watching T Canada globally, right? So it's
Unless they're in the
yeah.
playoffs, yes.
So it's one of those things where like this is like you're part of something bigger than just the soccer. And
Mm.
it was also really cool to see because the countries also like travel, the different federations stayed in different parts of Qatar.
Mm.
So where we stayed in a place called the Pearl,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of Brazilian fans.
Yeah.
And it like they turned, unlike what you'd hear on on TV. It was very much little Brazil, and that isn't quite on par with what you'd expect to see in Qatar, because like there was like full drums, full Brazilian
Yeah.
vibes everywhere. So
Yeah.
it felt like you were in Brazil, even though you're in Qatar. So it
Yeah.
was, and the Moroccan Federation also stayed in the very same place we were staying at.
Yeah.
So like the vibes from just different countries, and I think it was, I don't know. I It's gonna be very hard to top an experience like that, to be honest, for this World Cup, knowing that it's so separated.
Squared it
Yeah,
out,
it's
yeah.
very spread out, and that's unfortunate. I mean, I hope that, someday we'll see another World Cup where it's contained, and,
So you like that.
I do.
So this part I can answer because I'd interview one of my friend. His name is Arne Lindberg, and he was part of the Qatar working directly, building from scratch for the World Cup,
Okay.
FIFA World Cup 2022, and he's now currently consulting for FIFA for the North American. And he was explaining the difference between games like FIFA games prior to Qatar. They're generally hosted in a country like Russia,
Yeah.
and the teams play within the country, so they're moving around the country. Stadiums are built or utilized within the country, whereas Doha is so small and Qatar is so small. They adopted what he called the Olympic model, which is
Yeah.
it's in a city. It's
Yeah.
contained in the city. So all the games are in the city rather than spreading out through Qatar. And I said, so how did that shift it from that scale to North America? He's like, it's because the interest has grown and there are more teams involved. And so I think this is the first time they've adopted the triad
Yeah.
countries. And they're going to do it again for the next round of World Cup, which is Morocco, Spain, and Portugal.
Yes.
And he says, again, it's just the growing interest
Yeah.
of the country. But like you, he said that it's gonna be challenging because, like you said, you have to move to or fly to a different location to support that team
Yeah,
or watch a team, whereas having everything containerized in one location, from what I hear from you, is
yeah.
it's a more preferable experience?
Yeah, I think it's more accessible in this sense for people that want to attend, like, a one-off match. Not
Yes.
pricing-wise, though. Like,
Yeah.
I think that kinda hurts that model, right? Like, the
Yeah.
whole at the end, the whole, like, pricing ethics and whatnot,
Let's get into it because,
it's
I think
yeah.
part of, the conversation I've had with a lot of, let's go into your thoughts on FIFA.
I mean, so just to compare, I bought my ticket for France, Australia, took Jesse, and it cost me about $75 per ticket for 5th row.
Oh,
So now
wow.
compare that to wanting to attend a match that
$75.
and this is France, Australia. This is you're
Yeah.
getting a team that, is the former World Cup champion, and you're watching them for $75. Attended the Portugal Ghana game where you're seeing Ronaldo. That ticket cost us about, I think like let's call it 80 to $100 per ticket. All three of us attended. How do you compare that to blindly buying a ticket? Because the way that it was priced here is before the teams were even allocated, you could
Mhm.
blind buy a ticket, which I almost did. And I think it started at $680. Not a knock at any of the teams involved or anything like that, because
Mhm.
I know that, their own fans are, going to be passionate about uh, watching them play and whatnot. But
Mm.
the outcome of the match that I would have spent, we'll call it collective 1,500 bucks, for the whole family, would have been, I think, Iraq against Senegal,
Mhm.
maybe. Like, I'll be honest, I'm probably not gonna watch that game at home, but I'm
Mm.
spending $1,500 blind to watch that match. I would have felt cheated to do
Yeah.
so, right? Whereas here, the World Cup in Qatar, you got 2 teams that were already allocated. This was the
Yes.
last
And they
minute,
were high
so
caliber team
high
too.
caliber teams. Let's go to the most expensive match, um, Argentina versus Saudi Arabia, right?
Mhm.
You know that Argentina is going to be expensive because of the Messi effect, and they went on to win that tournament. And Saudi Arabia is Qatar's next door neighbor, so you're going to have interest from those countries, so draw up the cost. You're still seeing a high caliber match, and that was actually one of the biggest upsets in the entire World Cup. So it was one of the coolest matches I saw. Where even though Argentina didn't win, it was
Mhm.
such a cool vibe. Like
Right.
it was very cool. You're not going to get that here because the like, the pricing that you're putting on those tickets, you're already eliminating the casual fan or, like,
Why
call
do
it
you
the average person,
but
right?
why do you think that's the case though? Like, what was it about Qatar where the price was more manageable compared to what's happening now? Or were you aware of, like, even in Russia, like, what were the pricing? Did you even hear anything
I
about Russia?
I looked into it, because I think I would have
You
been a
yeah,
bad Peruvian if I didn't even, like,
your
dabble and
curiosity,
see.
that's
Yeah. Even
understandable,
though it
yeah.
was, completely unfeasible or feasible at the time, there was an interest, and I can't remember the pricing, but it was still on more on par with what Qatar was.
Mm,
When you have one match happening in so I think BMO Field has total of 5 matches,
right.
right? Everybody that's in Toronto that's never attended a World Cup match that wants to say, "I've attended a World Cup
Yes.
match," is gonna go for those 5 tickets. It's
Right.
gonna drive. I understand why the cost is high.
Is that for me, you think?
I think so. I mean, and I think they got, like, over I can't remember the stat, but the amount of applications that they got was overwhelmingly high. So, it
Mm.
makes sense that they price as high as they did. Whereas Qatar is not that accessible, so the average, the non-soccer fan isn't traveling to
Right.
Qatar
Yeah.
just taking a World Cup. And if you have an interest and it is feasible for you and you just want to be a part of it, you're probably not going to go for like the highest price matches. So
Mm.
it drove down the cost. It made the cost a little bit more reasonable, I think, for the average fan. The fan that was already there, I know like tons of people that I met at that tournament that were just refreshing the app on a daily basis. Like, hey, what's happening today and how much are tickets?
Yeah.
And I did it a couple of times. We ended up going to, I think, Brazil, Switzerland, got a free ticket to that. And
Wow.
it was very much, like a more of a community feel
Yeah.
because of it. and it was very accessible because it was all contained in one city, right?
Mm. But you
Whereas
going back to you were saying you were curious about the Russia pricing.
yeah,
How much was it going for?
I think it was going equivalent to what the um, Qatar pricing was, where you'd pay about like $300 to $400 a match. What made Russia not accessible though was the travel costs would have been significant
Mm.
and accommodations. Like even Qatar, to be honest, if we didn't have the free accommodations, it
Yes.
would have been very tough
Yes.
to even consider because
'Cause
we were
I
there for like almost a
yeah,
month.
I
So
remember, like, just, like, going a month before, and I stayed in, the main tourist hotel. I just stayed there for a night. I'd booked, like, maybe, like this was, like, a month ahead. It cost me about $85 a night, and
yeah,
then when I refreshed for the World Cup, it was, like, going for
yeah, I
$500 a
believe
night. I
it.
was like, "Holy!" Like,
Yeah.
that's insane. Any other thoughts on FIFA?
No, I'll leave my FIFA thoughts aside because I mean,
You're allowed
I
to, yeah.
hate the I to be honest, like I hate the politics behind the game. Like I'm very much a fan of the sport of
Mhm.
soccer and like the I hate the politics that run behind. I'm
Yes.
just not a politics guy in general.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate that the average or the casual fan cannot access the game.
Yes.
That's the whole takeaway, I guess, from the FIFA
Yeah.
standpoint.
That's cool. Okay, let's go into, Chelsea. Like, how did that evolve?
Let's go to 2005. Still very much, I don't know
Premier League?
anything outside of the Peruvian league, even though it's been a while. But soccer and I had an interesting. I took a pause from soccer for a long time. Like once I wasn't actively playing as much, I kind of life took me in a different
Mhm.
direction and came back to soccer again in like my late teens, early 20s.
Yeah,
And at
but
that
but
time,
what prompted it? 'Cause I remember you saying you started picking it up
yeah,
in high school. Was that why you went back to it?
no, like I don't know, like I think part of growing up, like you don't really know, like you could be many different things. And
Mhm.
I took an interest in music, and I went all in into music.
Yeah.
Still very much am, but now, in adulthood, you realize you can be more than one thing, and you can have
Yes.
more than one passion and hobby. But
Yeah.
once I was very much into music, I was in bands, and like it just took me away from sports, and I was very dedicated to like music and
Mhm.
like being in bands, and took that very seriously
Yeah.
and really tried to make it a thing. But like once you it kind of dawns on you that like you can have many interests and you don't have to be one dimensional. Went Started watching soccer again at around. I always watched Peru and the Peruvian team, but didn't follow any other leagues or anything like that. Around 2005, there was a Peruvian player that went to Chelsea. His name was Claudio Pizarro, and he was, I think, one of the Peru's, uh, I guess, most like his style of play was most attractive in terms of like world caliber.
But what role did
Um,
what was his
he was a
position?
striker, and he went to Chelsea. And at the time, I'm like, well, this is kind of cool. I don't know anything about Chelsea, so I started watching, kind of like few games. And at the time, I didn't realize he had gone to one of the bigger teams. Like I knew
Yeah. Yeah.
nothing about the Premier League.
Yeah.
And at the time, they had Jose Mourinho, who is one of the you know all-time greatest managers, not just for Chelsea but globally known as one of them. And that was it. Like it was,
You were committed.
it was one of those love at first sights. Like once watched one match, it was well, when do they play again? And next thing you know, I'm diehard.
Yeah.
I'm still very passionate about Chelsea. I watch every week. They break my heart every every other week. But they've had some success over the years.
Yeah.
That's the thing about soccer. Like if you're passionate about it and you're diehard, you're gonna have a lot of heartbreak in between.
But I love that curiosity about you in the sense that, like, you've transitioned, the foundation of your love for the sport and kinda come to that awareness, and where does that awareness come from that you didn't always have to commit to that lane, you know what I mean? Like, yes, as much as you were born Peruvian, you started off with your maternal's
Yeah,
team,
yeah,
Lima, but then you're like, "I kinda like the opposing team instead,
yeah,
I'm gonna gravitate towards that," and then you transition to, like, Canada where you realize, "Okay, I can go for Team Canada and still support Peru," um, and then everything else in between, music, baseball, and then returning back to it as a teenager,
yeah.
and then following, like how did you follow, like, like that player, the Peruvian player, to go to Chelsea? Like, would
It
you
was a
check
big
in from
deal.
time to time to?
No, it was like this was kind of like, I still very much followed like Peruvian sports news, not necessarily news in general, but like like I always followed like, as part of just watching sports, you watch Sports Center and watch like
Mm,
all of the
oh,
happenings.
highlights, yeah.
And like there was always an interest in watching soccer highlights, like because Peru is not really on the kind of scale that you see the highlights on Canadian TV or anything
Mm,
like that. But Premier League was, and you heard of this transfer news, and I was like, wait a second, I know that guy. And so
mm.
it's like, so it was a big deal. Um, and he didn't even stay in Chelsea for that long, to be honest. It was
But even after he left, you still
yeah,
were loyal to Chelsea?
once that happened, there was a very early onset of that happening. I started to understand the love for the club more so than the players, because the players come and go, and
Yeah.
like, but it's the club that you're kind of drawn to.
Well, what
It's
was it even
different.
after he left that, the coach was still there, though, the coach that you
Yeah,
liked. But what was it about the club that made you still wanna commit to it?
I think once you got sucked into the culture of it and the chants and like the stadium, and I did travel to London to take in a couple of matches, and once you go there and like you live it and are in it, it's you can't ever let it go. And I don't know how to even explain that feeling of like it's impossible for me to even fathom
Yeah.
following something different. Like
See, it's
it's not
funny because
possible.
the the friends I've interviewed, are in London, who's Sweden, and he'll always support Sweden. He's like, once upon a time, Sweden used to be the top tier, but he's happy. When I asked him what team he's rooting for, he said, "I'll be happy if Qatar. I'll be happy if Sweden, because Sweden also made it. I'll be happy if Canada.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So these in Australia, because these are the places he's lived in. But the other two I've interviewed, other two friend, I asked them about their choice. So they're big Manchester United fans. I said, "How do you decide that, right?" And the
Yeah.
both of them on both their part, it's a legacy. Joe, he grew up like his paternal side was
Yeah.
all big Manchester United, um, whereas Arish, he's Tanzanian, and he said Premier League football was a big thing in Tanzania, and um, his brothers and uncles were either Chelsea or Manchester
Yeah.
United, and so he went for Manchester United, where his brother chose Chelsea, right? So they're
Okay.
always bantering against each other in that regard. And I asked, "Do you ever relinquish the team?" They're like, "No, no, we don't." Because I said, "How do you
Yeah.
decide a team won? And do you ever flip flop?" They're like, "No, once you commit to it, you commit to it for life. You gotta
Yeah.
turn back." And I thought, "Oh wow, that's a really committed dedication to a sports team, especially like what you said, like." You still never lost interest in Peru. You've expanded to include Peru,
Yeah.
your foundation team, Canada, TFC, the Jays, obviously, that's a
Yeah,
side
yeah, yeah.
note. But now, like Chelsea for the Peruvian player, but also after he left the club itself, you
Yeah,
know.
it goes beyond. I mean, I think so I've been a Chelsea fan for over 20 years at this point.
Yeah.
So it's been a while. It's really hard to explain these things because, for example, there's a new team that actually just launched. So there's below or just below the MLS
Mm.
where TFC plays. There's now the Canadian Premier League.
Yes.
And now the Canadian Premier League is fairly new. It's growing the sport. And there's a team that plays out of York University.
Mhm.
They used to be called York Nine and then York United. They've rebranded this year as Inter Toronto. So took Jesse last week and thought, let's go check this out. This is something we've never done. And it was their inaugural match. So it was, day one. And we're immediately fans. Like
Yeah.
like that. And that's one of those things where like now we're kind of part of that history.
Yeah.
And
But what was the appeal of like this new league that drew you in?
it's accessible. Like it's right there.
Yes.
It's also like another Toronto team.
Yeah.
We're seeing it from the ground up. So
Yeah.
I unfortunately was not like although I was into Toronto FC from the very early
Mhm.
onset, I can't say I was there from like launch day.
Yes.
Here we are part of the day one history. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be cool to see how the team evolves, how they grow, their
But I liked
players
your
and
flexibility in the sense, like, even, like, when we were watching the TFC game, Toronto versus Orlando, yes, you were supporting of the Toronto team, but you also liked the keeper
Mm,
because he's Peruvian.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
weren't against it. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, like, I feel like when
yeah,
people choose a team, it's like that's their forever, and they will not look. I mean, I think
yeah,
what I'm trying to get at is like I I think from the discussions I've had so far with a lot of football culture friends that I've interviewed, they will always be loyal to that one team and still appreciate players from other teams.
yeah.
You know what I mean? But in your case, you appreciate players from other team, and you also like other teams too, and you grow to
Yes.
encompass that, right?
There's a big asterisk there though. I won't ever like two teams within the same league. So for
Oh,
example,
okay.
like in Peru, I like the La U, I
Mm.
like the national team. In Canada, I like the Canadian national
Mhm.
team, the Toronto teams, which will never, I mean, who knows, they might play against each other someday in a Canadian competition, but and then there's Chelsea. I don't see a world in which
They would
those
ever
would
collide?
collide, but there, I mean, you never know. So Canada and Peru did play in the Copa America a couple of years ago in the States, and we traveled obviously to
Yeah.
Kansas City to watch the match, and Canada won. Canada
Mm.
beat Peru, and it was, I was conflicted, but not really. Like I was happy to see Canada win.
Yeah.
My wife wore her Canada kit. I wore my Peru kit, and we held both flags up.
Yeah.
And then I even met Jesse Marsh, the Canada head coach,
Yeah.
wearing my Peru kit, and he was very jokey and nice about it.
But I love that
And
you can marry different supporting
yeah,
teams in a same family household. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like you can honor all those different aspects. But I think it's kind of like what you said earlier that the difference between Peru and even the Premier League, like the Premier League can have like multiple team in representing one city,
yeah,
whereas like in Toronto, Canada, it's either it's just Toronto and
yeah, yeah,
Canada,
yeah,
or you know what I mean? Like there isn't multiple like Toronto League team
exactly.
competing at the same level with each other, like club wise,
Yeah,
right? It's just one team representing the city, one team representing Canada.
yeah,
So for you to watch like Canada versus Peru, you weren't really picking side. You were honoring both aspects of where you are at right
yeah,
now.
yeah. I agree with that statement. And like what I and I guess this, like when you take it outside of just the context of like two
Mm.
teams battling each other, I think you appreciate the spectacle and the sport that they're putting into it.
Mhm.
So like my message to Jesse. So like I do, like I'm not his coach, but I do help coach the team at times, or
Mhm.
certain aspects of coaching. And what I'll always feel, you know, cheer your team or celebrate your team, but don't knock the other team. I'm
Yes.
never gonna. And I see it in multiple stadiums and multiple games.
Yeah.
You boo the other team or you boo their star player. Their star player is why you're there sometimes. Like
Yes.
like when Messi comes out and Toronto FC's playing Inter Miami, they boo Messi. How could you boo Messi? Like
Yeah.
he is the reason
That
you're
there's
pretty much
spotlight. Yeah.
watching that. There's so much interest in
Yeah.
that match
Yes.
because you're seeing something that is outside the anomaly of just an average player.
Yes.
And I respect and like love that. Am I
Mhm.
gonna cheer when he scores against Toronto? Heck no. No. I'll probably boo him then, but am I gonna boo the player? No. Like
No.
that is, like it's part of the game, part of what
Yes.
you want to
You're
watch,
teaching
part of
him
the
more a high
spectacle.
ground, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's nice. Okay, so let's segue from was it because of your introduction and your love for the Premier League that got you into Ted Lasso? How did that help us navigate that?
Yeah. So Ted Lasso was I was a late bloomer to Ted Lasso because I'm not every time somebody tells me about a show, I'm like,
Mm.
I'm never the person that's gonna jump right to it
Same,
and then
yeah.
go, watch. I started on TikTok, you see these little clips. And I would always get sort of these little Ted Lasso clips. And the more you click and the more you watch, the more
Yeah,
you
the
get sort of.
algorithm knows you're here.
And next thing you know, I'm like, what? All like 100% of my feed is Ted Lasso clips. I'm like, I gotta watch this actual show. So like, I think part of what I love about it's not the, you know, yes, there's like the exaggerated like football, soccer culture, but it's the person behind the like. To be honest, I like the character Ted Lasso probably more so than the
The players?
soccer development and
Mm. But what is it about Ted that you like?
He's an underdog, right?
Yeah.
Like he goes into a job not knowing he's an American football guy, and he goes and has to coach, soccer team, trying to use like his practices and mentality from
Yeah.
American football and apply it to a sport that's completely foreign to him.
Right.
I kind of like that. Like, if
It's
you just
relatable,
analyze the
yeah.
character, he's just like, hey, this is an underdog guy who's trying to adapt to something he's not used to, and
Yeah.
he's doing a great job at it.
Yeah.
He's got his own struggles, so he's got his own mental health.
Mhm.
He's going through panic attacks, and he's navigating. He's a relatable guy.
Yeah.
At the end of it all, he's trying to instill belief in his players, right? And
Yes.
like the believe is the what's going to kind of power them to be a better
Right.
team, and you got to love that message,
Yeah.
whether it's soccer or life.
Yeah. Or who were some of your aside from Ted, who were some of your favorite characters?
Um, I love Roy Kent. So like I don't know. There's a whole story behind his character too, which is I find fascinating. But um, I love kind of diving into the characters and how
Yeah.
they develop. His character was very much mirrored after a Manchester United player.
Yeah, so I learned this from
Yeah,
my interview with Joe, we were talking, and because he was saying, as a Manchester United fan, he was a big Roy Keane,
yeah.
and I'm like, I'm putting the dots together. Is Roy Keane inspired by Roy Keane? He's like, that is the archetype character,
Yeah.
right?
So it's hilarious that they named the character Roy because they had put that as a placeholder because
Yes.
he's modeled after Roy Keane. Um, So when it came to table read, he's like, "We are gonna change the name of the character," right? They just never bothered. And I find that hilarious that that character is a direct rip off of some.
Yeah.
But beyond that, you have like it's been a while since I watched it, but Jamie
Mm,
Tart, for
mm,
example, who's like kind of like the prima donna player who's like
okay.
larger than life and
Yeah.
like um and at first all you see is the surface level, like annoying, pompous, but then you actually like, there's layers to him
Mhm.
too, and you see his vulnerable side, his like willingness to accept that he's not the top dog at
Mhm.
times. So like it's a very relatable show. Like
Yeah.
like whether you have forget the soccer aspect, you see this in your job every day. But like
Yes.
you have the,
The humanistic side.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You have the manager that, can be a little bit you see the surface level, but you don't necessarily know what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
It's very relatable. I really appreciate how much layers there is to each character.
What were your thoughts of just seeing it from a mental health lens, especially in male sports, which up until that point I hadn't seen.
Mhm.
Like obviously, I don't watch a lot of sports drama, but just to to normalize mental health
Yeah.
in Premier League, obviously, hypothetically, but just to normalize that, like on a screen, what was your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think they did a good job in kind of walking through the beginning and middle stage and overcome, right? So like I think the first time you notice it is like he has a panic attack mid-match and doesn't allude to it, is not very upfront about what happened. So you don't actually know what happened to the character at the time.
Mm,
Um, and then as he undergoes therapy and like starts talking to a psychologist, he kind of starts to unpack like some of the reasons behind his and he's still, they didn't package it up in a bow and throw it away. Like he's
no.
still living with it.
Right.
He learns techniques to overcome it
Or manage
and
it.
manage it, exactly, not overcome it. But he starts to recognize when he's gonna have one and like techniques to overcome. He's upfront with the team that this is what's happening with him. I really appreciated that. I mean, do I think it's realistic that everybody's gonna be upfront about their struggles? No. So
Was there ever something like something you obviously now I would say post COVID mental health, it's gotten a bit better in terms of being normalized.
yeah.
But the conversation around it is still it still has a long way to go.
Hmm.
But especially in sports, like from a male lens, like
Yeah.
when you were growing up with it, and obviously it was brief in Peru, but returning it to high school and even now, like what are your thoughts on it and what were your experience with it?
Um, So, like, honestly, in sports, I haven't observed it as much. Like, if I can take a detour, like in music, for example, like it's huge, right? Like I've served a lot of people that I've known over the years go through mental health struggles, and some of them ultimately took their life. Like, it's a serious, it's a topic that's still somewhat of a taboo subject to
Yes.
talk about and
Yeah.
discuss, and it's not, whether it's sports, music, it's
It's universal, yeah.
yeah. And I actually happen to work for Bell. So Bell has, as you know, like the
Mental health, let's
mental
talk.
health drive and Let's Talk program. So I think I was exposed to a lot of the conversational aspects of mental health and like confronting about it I worked for the company for 20 years. So like
Mhm.
very early in my career, I
Right.
started observing. I didn't know that it was a struggle for that many people, to be
Yeah.
honest, because it wasn't talked about. Even the people that like you kind of, it sounds insensitive to say it this way, but like lost along the way in the music industry, like didn't know what they were going through.
Yeah.
It wasn't talked about. It wasn't. There was no follow up. Like just kind of like this is what happened to
It's
me.
just
That's
this
it.
is the news, they died, this
Yeah.
is the reason, yeah.
And I mean, I'm glad that it's talked about more so now, but it still has a long way to go.
Yes.
It's not the pretty picture that's painted on TV where it's like
No.
this is the number, talk about it. No,
It's a start, though, I
it's a
think,
start.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a start. I mean, like, I think, like, especially not just mental health, but like you said, like, the layered, complexity of and this is to your own experience too, that, when you start to come to that awareness that you don't have to stay in one lane, that
Yeah.
you can occupy multiple lanes or
Yeah.
multiple, um, facet that kinda meet your personality or encompass that, that's okay, right?
Yeah.
But I think it was also vulnerability, especially from
Yeah.
a male lens, because vulnerability and mental health, they intersect, right?
Yeah.
And so just to see that on screen, normalized, yes, it's it's wishful thinking,
Yeah.
but it does exist. It's just maybe it's not so openly conveyed that we're aware of. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And even like you said, like even in the music industry, like vulnerability, is that ever something that comes
It
up?
doesn't happen. Like it's not talked about. I mean, it's talked about more so now than it was, 20 years ago, but it's not something that's prominent or advertised as like
Mhm.
let's confront our mental health issues. Back to Ted Lasso for a second, because Ted Lasso goes, I think it addresses multiple, like not just mental health, but it addresses so many things that happen in society that you don't talk about.
Racism,
Sexuality, like
yeah,
there's
homophobia,
everything.
gender, because Rebecca, she's a
Yeah.
manager of the team, and a woman as a manager is unthought
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
You know, I like that because it kind of like you said, because you normally don't see that in one show,
Yeah.
that layer of complexity.
Divorce and family dynamic. There's just so many layers to it. Like that's what I don't think there's a show out there that kind of covers, or maybe I'm wrong, but like covers all bases like that.
Yeah,
Kind of just in the soccer. It's
exactly.
kind of like, I don't think you find that anywhere else. So I think for me personally, it kind of hit on every aspect of.
Same, and I think what I liked about the show, and maybe it's kind of like say, you don't. Yes, you can have your favorite character, but I think I can relate to almost all the character
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, it's kind of like going back to we're multifaceted. You
Yeah.
know, I think we're in a society that only um, perpetuates binary thinking, right?
Hmm.
But the nuance of the human experience is very complex and layered, and so in each of the character, I can see aspects of myself, and
Yeah.
all of them in their own way want to be seen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Can I be seen in a safe space without having to constantly hide this part of myself?
Yeah.
And can I be accepted? And eventually, they all get to be seen
Yeah.
in this like this team environment as they're navigating their individual journey, but as a collective unit, they
Yeah.
finally like start to see each other rather than like see them like what you said, just the layer, the surface layer part, which is
Hmm.
you're just the athlete, you're just this position. And then as they get to know each other through bonding beyond the sports itself, they're like, oh, you're a human being just like me, experiencing
Yeah.
a version of my own vulnerability and struggle and whatnot, you know?
Yeah.
On that note, let's go back to the question, one of the question, which is, um, reflecting back on your journey through the world of soccer, football culture, what are some of the things you learned about yourself? How did you connect to yourself, and how did you connect to the people around you, or even the community?
I think that word community is like, key to my journey. I like being part of something bigger,
Mhm.
but I like being an individual at the same time. So
Yes.
like, I think it's kind of cool to represent or kind of bring your love of the sport
Mhm.
to that sense of community.
Yes.
So Canada and in Toronto, because one is brand new and the other one is growing. So like
Mhm.
Canada on the national level, like yes, there's already an existing culture and supporter group, but you mentioned it. When you go to a game at BMO Field, it's 90% the other country,
Mhm.
10% Canada.
Yes.
We, and when I say we, I mean like the collective football community in Canada, like majority of those fans that supported Tunisia, I guarantee that the majority live in Canada, you know, contribute to Canada, benefit. We will slowly and hopefully start to shift that community to, hey, we can support both. Like
Yes.
we don't have to make the Canadian football team feel away in
Yes.
their own home.
Yes.
And I think like, that was one of Jesse Marsh's, our coach, biggest concerns going into if it was Italy. You'd have a stadium of blue and not enough Canadian support, even though we're in Canada, and majority of people that would be supporting the team would be Canadian born, right?
What Okay, so
Uh,
let's side tangent.
yeah.
What are your thoughts about um where they were giving away their Canadian jersey
Yeah.
in exchange for Italian jersey because the Italian team didn't make
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
But in the end, they allowed them to keep their Italian
yes.
jersey in addition to the Canadian jersey. So that's kind of like a
Yeah,
metaphor to what we were talking about. You can hold space for both teams.
exactly.
You don't need to relinquish one to choose the other, right?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I love that campaign, personally, because they ended up, like you said, they ended up giving it ended up being you're not forfeiting this side of you.
Yes.
You're promoting this
Yes.
side of you now, which is great. And that's the way, in my opinion, they should have positioned it like that
Yes.
to begin with. Like, hey, show up with your Italian jersey and we will
Yes,
give you
rather
your
than,
Canada
like,
jersey with a
surprise them at
swap.
the end, yeah.
Because the swap for me is complicated because you shouldn't have to forfeit
Yes,
one side of
I
yourself to promote the
agree.
other.
You shouldn't have to ever choose,
Yeah,
yes.
that's kind of like booing. You have to
Yes.
boo Italy to cheer. No, you don't have to.
And I think this is, like, from even my own journey that again, going back to the binary thinking is, like, you're good, you're bad. The school teaches you either good student or a
Yeah,
bad student. You're a good daughter or a bad daughter. That "or" is always the elephant in the room, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Whereas I think through my own healing journey, I'm learning to replace the "or" with
yes,
and say, I am, because I always had to choose between being Canadian and Vietnamese, even though I was born Vietnamese, that I was raised in the Vietnamese culture, I gravitate more towards relatability to the Western culture. And I think
yeah,
somewhere along the way, that realization that I can bridge that and honor
yeah, yeah, yeah.
both aspect of who my identity is, which is I am Vietnamese and Canadian, right?
Yes,
And so going back to you say, you can be Italian and Canadian, or you can be Peruvian and Canadian
yeah,
and encompass Chelsea. Love for
yeah. I
Chelsea
mean,
too.
it's complex, right? There's so many
Yes.
layers to it, but like what I'm hoping, the Canadian and Canada soccer is in its infancy. It really is
Yes.
because like you don't have a like even why I'm so into the Canadian Premier League is because we finally now have like kind of like a feeder or like a farm system almost
Yes.
where they'll hopefully feed into teams like TFC
Yeah.
and then represent your country. Like
They
that's
they
been
already
missing.
have that in place for, like, Major League Baseball
Everything.
and hockey and
Yeah.
basketball, right? Like the 905
Yeah.
for the Raptors, and then you have, like, for
The Buffalo. So
Buffalo? Yeah.
their minor league team is
And
in
then you have,
Buffalo.
like, is it Marlies for the Leafs?
But yeah, there's a farm system for everything. And what I'm hoping happens is you kind of see. So I hope that support in teams like Inter Toronto or
Mm.
the Canadian Premier League grow in general.
Mhm.
That you start seeing those players develop into like, hey, that player is ready for the MLS now. Like,
Mm.
and it doesn't matter if they play for TFC or anywhere else in the
Right.
MLS. Like, I think we're kind of like proud of our, well, again, I hope as a community, soccer community, you encourage and recognize, hey, that player is now coming up to an MLS
Mm.
level. That player is now representing Canada.
Yeah.
You know, the Alfonso Davies like he played in the, you know, I remember watching him play for the Whitecaps. And that was, you knew there was something special. Like you knew there's
Who's the
something
White
about
Cat?
the Vancouver Whitecaps
Okay.
in the MLS. There was something special about him and you could see it.
Mm.
It's like, this guy is different from all the rest and he's going to go places. And, you know, now he plays for Bayern Munich. He's gone on to bigger and better. Still, obviously, we're still representing Canada, but we're proud of our export.
Yes.
We don't have a lot of exports.
Yeah.
And I think part of that will help Canada as a football community be, you know, supportive of your own brand, like proud
Right.
of you. This
Yeah.
is, it's hard to support
A homegrown
a
brand.
homegrown brand if the output is not great, right?
Yes.
So like, I think the expectation is, and I'm going to pick on Italy for a second, unfortunately, but you know, they haven't made the World Cup in 3 years yet. Their fan base is still believing that they're, you know, I think there was a rumor that, you know, should it be that Iran needs to be replaced, it's going to be Italy. And this is all rumor and speculative. But all of a sudden, there's that belief that, like, hey, if Italy enters as a replacement, they're going to take the whole thing. I wish we were like that, you know, like, hey, Canada's a host country. They have an advantage. They might take it. We're not there. We're
No.
nowhere close there. Like our hope is, and myself included, I'm ever the optimist, but I see a realistic outcome being Canada might win it, you know, a couple matches and they might go through the next round, in which we'll probably exit at round two. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And then that is my expectation and hopeful outcome.
Right.
But I think we are a very long way from like, we are going to win the World Cup. And who knows, we might get there
Yeah. Someday.
someday. We have the perfect, I think what Canada fans fail to realize at this point is we are the perfect melting pot for that to happen. There is no other country in the world that can
Yes.
take, like, we have the, you know, Brazilians, we have Italians, we have
Yes.
Argentinians.
Yes.
Let's put them all on the pitch and let's make this
Yes.
beautiful
I
game
love
happen,
that.
right?
Yeah.
But we're not there. Hopefully
Yes.
we'll get there
We'll get
someday.
there someday. Yeah. But going back to you were saying, like, what you love about this journey, you like the individual, bringing your own individual interests to the community side. Um, w- what are like other things that you learn through that experience, just in communal wise? Because I find that, like, again, going back to binary thing, it's like the Vietnamese culture and how I understand even the Peruvian culture, the Vietnamese culture is heavily, very much a collective.
Yeah.
The I doesn't exist.
Okay.
The I is only something that I've come to learn more of a Western way of thinking. And so it's choosing, like, if you choose yourself, you consider selfish and you
Okay.
forsaken the collective, right? So it's always you have to choose the collective and forsake the
Okay.
I. And again, somewhere along the way, we're in my navigation of understanding how do I hold space for both
Yeah.
and bridge that gap and change that perspective of the way culturally thinking. It's like the collective is a, a summary of multiple eyes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you can nurture the eye and allow it to, or the individual to bring something that um, they see from a different lens that can help benefit the collective, why not cycle that back in
Yeah.
rather than like shaming them for leaving the collective? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that kind of goes the Peruvian aspect of what I'm bringing to the Canadian table here is like, really, it's a sense of belief in Peru's always been the underdog, and we all know it. As a Peruvian, you know, whether it's in soccer or whether it's like on a political spectrum, the Peruvian is a little bit of the underdog,
Right.
and you know, through the you know, at the worst of times, you ask the average Peruvian, like, who's going to win the World Cup? And it's Peru. And like that almost false sense of confidence and belief and faith in the team is kind of what I'm hoping, to, you know, like,
To translate to Canada,
yeah,
yeah.
I want to bring that kind of blind optimism to the table. I think I'm more realistic than the average
Yes.
person, that came from that background where like I know what's gonna happen,
Yeah.
but do I think that there is a possibility, there's that you're telling me there's a chance.
That's the
And
beautiful thing about hope,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
it's 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 holding space for that possibility regardless of the quantity or if it's small or if it's grand hope. It's
yeah.
still hope in that regard. The other question is, what are some of your highs and low of navigating whether it's the sports culture or the football culture?
Um, Lows. I'll give you an example of a low, even it's not a low, but
Mm.
it's I guess you could view it both ways. Always wanted to attend a World Series match or a game. So I got to go to that game 7 where the Blue Jays lost the World Series last year. So they were 2 outs away from, I don't have to tell Toronto. I mean, anybody from Toronto does.
Yes.
But, you know, what watching them lose that game was an absolute heartbreaker.
Yes.
You felt a collective grief in that stadium
Yes.
because like you were so close to
They were
to the
such an
watch.
underdog
Like
going
they were
in.
like, you know, I'm sounding like a bit of a softie here, but like I don't think any of us that there was a dry eye there. It was an emotional time. Like
Yeah.
you were so close, and as a city, you just like you felt it. Like that whole stadium felt it. A lot of people left as soon as the loss happened because like you don't want to watch the other team celebrate. My friend that I went with was like, "Let's go," and I'm like, "No, no, no, I am not leaving.
Yeah.
I am watching the other team celebrate. I'm
Yes.
gonna go close and watch the other team celebrate. I'm gonna watch them do their interviews because I think that grief and I don't know if grief is the right words, but
It
like
is, yeah.
I think yeah, maybe.
Grief grief, I think it's people's association with what grief is a one size
Yeah,
should look a certain way, but to it's experienced individually
yeah,
different and to different degree.
yeah,
And that was a valid grief. Of you're mourning your team's loss
yeah.
at
I
a
think that's
collective
fair.
level.
Yeah,
Very
and it's a whole country's loss, right? Like at
yes.
that point. Um, I felt that by watching the other team celebrate, when it eventually does come our way, it's gonna feel that much better. I can't even remember the question to be honest, but I was going somewhere
No,
with this.
the highs and lows
Oh
of
yeah,
that
so
experience.
that was like that was the low, the low point, and I think it'll feel that much sweeter when we eventually
But
experience a
even
high.
when were you aware when they did the back-to-back World Series? Did you experience that when the city won?
Yes, but I was 9. So I mean, there's a
Mm.
very different level of feel
Yes. At
when
9
you
versus as a
win
medal.
something when you're and I can like I think the closest I can compare that like Chelsea's won the Champions League in 2012 and then I think again in 2021. Um those highs like are you got to just soak them in because they're so rare. Like, when you get to experience that with a community, it's a little bit different with Chelsea because there isn't like a local community. It's like me and Jesse and like the handful of other people that cheer for that team,
Right.
on
Yeah.
the other side of the pond that you
Yeah.
can celebrate and cheer with.
Whereas this is the whole country at your
This is the
back.
whole country, right? So like
Yeah.
we haven't like since the 90s, but I was too young to experience it. The Raptors were kind of in
Yeah.
that, in that camp where um when you get that feeling of like you don't even know what to do with yourself. It's like
Yes.
absolute euphoria.
Yeah.
And you know, actually in the Blue Jays series last year when they won the ALCS, when when George Springer hit that home run, it was a sense of euphoria like I
Mhm.
haven't experienced personally, like with a whole
Yes.
collective where you were hugging random strangers, and I
Yeah.
think I picked my friend up who is much
Yeah.
bigger than I am, and
Yeah.
like threw him up.
I
It
think
is like
that's
you don't know what to do with yourself when it's. I love that feeling. It's very. It's a high that you can't really get in a day to day life.
but I think it's especially with playoffs more specifically is I've talked to a lot of people and observed the same thing is whatever your difference is, you leave it at the door and
Yeah,
you collectively support that that team that you're rooting for, right? But I appreciate that, that even though you were grieving, you still had space to watch the celebratory moment for the other team
yeah,
with the minds with the intention that if we ever do get to that caliber again, I know it'll be just as sweet as
Yeah.
observing this, right?
And I mean, there's something to be said, like, in watching the celebrations up close, you see so we went right down to field level pretty
Mm,
much, and there was a lot of people there from Japan that had come to support, like, Otani
yes.
and Nakamoto, and that was so cool, like, like,
You don't see
you
that, especially
you
in
kinda feel
baseball.
for them, like, you're happy for them, like, and it's, you'd have to be, like you'd have to try very hard to be like, "I'm mad at this," because you're kinda seeing, like, another person's, like, joy and light, like,
Yes.
they're at the peak, you are at
Yes.
the bottom of the
Yes.
barrel right now, but you're seeing another human being, like, get what you hope to get next year,
Yes.
kind of. So, there's something, like, I don't know. They always say baseball is romantic, and I guess that's
But
what
I
they
I
mean by
think
that.
that do you think that's uniquely you, though, your ability to hold space for, even going back to your principle and your mantra when you're coaching your son, is that, yes, we cheer for our team when we're doing well, and when the other team's not doing well, we take the high ground and still be professional or be, um, morally supportive and not put them down. Do you know what I mean? And that seems to
Yeah.
translate into that moment when you're observing, yes, I experienced this collective grief, and I can still hold space and witness the joy and the happiness of the Japanese fan and also the Dodgers fan,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, I think I have a pattern of doing that, to be honest. So when TFC how Toronto FC won their championship, they had gone to the finals with Seattle. They were in a penalty shootout, and I was there right behind the net when we missed that last penalty
Mhm.
kick, and they eventually won. And again, like, I stayed behind. My friends did leave, so I
Mhm.
was by myself, and I'm like, "I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna soak this in." I had my camera out, and I remember, like, taking photographs of the Seattle team celebrating, and, like, getting, like, like, you do feed off that energy. It's
Mhm.
almost impossible to, like, completely ignore it and, like, be mad at the moment. Like, you're sure, like, you can be disappointed at your team's loss and grieve the loss, but it's almost impossible to not feel something,
Yes.
whether it's jealousy or whether and there is a sense of jealousy. Like, I won't say, like, yeah, I'm happy for them, but I'm also, like, bitter that it's not me
Yes.
celebrating. But again, like, I took pictures and it when they won the next year, so the very next year, same thing happened. They
They won,
went
yeah.
they went up against Seattle, and this time, we got the glory, and it was again, it felt so much sweeter because I remember, watching, like, the
From the
other
other lens,
yeah,
yeah.
and, like, I think it makes it, like, that much
You
better for
appreciate it from
you,
both
and
sides,
it
yeah.
is a selfish thing in a way, like, I'm not trying to paint myself as,
No,
like, somebody that's,
but
like
I think that's
yeah,
a rare quality because I think you're the first person I observe or hearing where you're actually seeing it from both lens. Like, you can empathize, and be happy, but to s like, what you've described in both situations with the TFC game and the Jays World Series is that near the end, as your friends leave, you're like, "Nope, I'm gonna stay to the end and experience it from the other team and the
yeah,
other fans' lens, and hope that one day I'll experience from my own local team." And you did with the TFC, right?
yeah,
Especially, like, right after back-to-back
yeah.
year, right? For Seattle and then Toronto the following year. Where do you think that came from? Like, was it ever modeled for you, or is that
I
something you
don't
just
think
kinda
so, like, I mean, I think so empathy, right? Like, and I'm kinda just, kinda catching this as you're talking about, like, empathy is always viewed as, like, something you put yourself in the other
person's shoes?
shoes in a bad way or in a negative way, like, meaning what I mean by
I know
that
what
is,
you
like, you
mean.
feel like they're going through something bad, so I have empathy for them,
Mm,
and I'm, putting myself in their shoes if they're
yes.
experiencing something bad.
Yes, you're
Why
right.
can't it be the opposite though,
Yes,
right?
I
Like, they're
you
going
are
through
right.
something awesome, and I'm gonna feel empathy for them, and I can't experience it for them.
Yeah.
They're experiencing a high, and I'm gonna put myself in their shoes and kind of
See,
soak in
that's
that
new
high.
to me. I hadn't thought of it that
I
way.
hadn't thought about it like
But
that either,
you
though, to
are
be
correct
honest.
because I think, like, growing up, even culturally, like, it was always emphasized, like, imagine yourself in this person's shoe. It's always from that lens of understanding their suffering.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Whereas no one, I think, up until this point, until you said it, that why can't I empathize from a non-suffering lens? Why
yeah,
can't I empathize from a, like, celebratory
yeah.
lens? Because it is, like, a really joyous feeling to yes, it's unfortunate that your team lost, but to watch someone celebrate. And I think
Yeah.
that's still something that I have a hard time because I remember when I took my daughter to go watch the women's game,
Yeah.
and they play against Vancouver. And Toronto was the better team, but they ended up losing to Vancouver,
Yeah.
and it was just heartbreaking watching. And I couldn't stay to watch the celebration. I couldn't put my empathize in that situation because all I saw were the Toronto women, like, they were just going up and hugging each other, consoling each other, and
Yeah.
just navigating through this collective loss and
Yeah.
grief, and to me, it was like, "Wow, this is hitting me hard," and I don't think I can witness any more prolonged.
Yeah.
But I didn't think of it from that lens to watch from the Vancouver celebratory, you know?
But the pros do it. If you watch like any final, right? Like whenever the team loses, there's a handful of players that will sit on the bench and will just stare at the celebrations. And I think there's kind of like a I can't experience it from their lens, but like I think to them it must feel like a chip on their shoulder, like it's gonna be me next year, right?
Yeah.
And so like there's something to be said
Is
for like the
it?
players that stay behind and like really soak in the moment,
Mm.
because it's got to be that much better for them when they eventually like experience. And some players will never experience that euphoria,
Yes.
unfortunately. But I think as a fan, you only get a handful of opportunities to experience like that high. And I won't lie and tell you that if I'm watching on TV, I'm gonna stay and watch the
No,
celebration.
it's
No, like
different when
gosh,
you're
no.
there,
I'm
yeah.
gonna be swearing at the TV and throwing a remote like everybody else. But like it's different when you're in person. Like you've already paid for your ticket, you're
Yeah.
there. You might as well like enjoy the moment for what it's worth and like watch another
Yeah.
human get their turn before you get yours kind of deal.
Okay, as we wrap up, who do you think is gonna win this year's FIFA? Who would you like to win?
Oh, that's a tough question because the answer is not the same.
That's okay.
I think Spain is gonna win.
Yeah.
I think they have the best,
You're
like,
you're every
rounded team.
every friend I've interviewed regarding the subject matter has said Spain. Yeah.
Okay. I'm actually, like I'm of Spanish descent, so, like, I will be happy if Spain wins.
Mhm.
However, I am a South American first, like,
Okay.
and foremost, so I always cheer for and this sounds kinda like this is a very Peruvian thing to do and your team doesn't make it, so you kinda cheer for all of South America
Yeah,
collectively.
that's okay.
Um, I'd like to see a South American
Mm.
team. I don't think it's gonna happen. I think Spain is gonna take it
You can
all.
still hope, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that I always like to see a new team win because
Yes.
I think that kind of brings something new to the table. So I'd love to see like Colombia or some a team that's never won. Even well, like when we got into the later phases of the World Cup last time, as much as I wanted to see Messi win, when it was France against Argentina, it was 100% like I need Messi to win the cup.
Mm.
But when it was still in the lead ups, I got sucked into the Morocco. Even though I'm not a fan of theirs, it was cool watching. Like we saw them live,
Yeah.
beat Canada, and then we saw them take out Spain. And I was, I went
Yeah.
there draped in my Spanish flag,
Yeah.
and we were there when like the Moroccan fans were just such an overwhelmingly like passionate group that it was hard not to get sucked into, like, these
Yeah.
guys have something.
Yeah.
These guys have something that we don't have. The fans won that game for the team. Like
Yes.
there's something special about that. So if it's not Spain and
A
it's
South
not the
American
South
team?
American team, let it be a new team that hasn't
Yes.
won before, a first timer. Let me
Yeah.
soak that in.
Final question is, what are your hopes and or vision for whether it's sports or just football culture in general?
Um, Goes back to what I was saying. Like I hope that Canada eventually gets that same type. I hope to see a day in which Canada plays at home and feels like a home game
Mhm.
versus like whatever other nationality you came from.
Mm.
We are. This is why it's still in its infancy because we have a long way to go as a fan
Yes.
base, um, to learn to cheer on the Canadian team. Like we're in
Mm.
Canada, let's cheer on Canada, and let's still support our nationality. I think it's
Yes.
impossible to detach, right? Like
Yes.
I'm guilty of it myself. I cheer down
Yes.
Peru, but I think I found the right balance of how
Yes.
to do it without, like I'm not gonna boo Canada, but
Yes,
they do.
yes.
You
But
gotta,
I'd like that as a template going forward for just I think giving fans out there, whether it's FIFA or, outside of FIFA, permission to hold space for multiple teams,
Yeah.
and there's no shame in that, right?
Yeah, we're multi-layered creatures, so
Exactly.
let's behave that way, right?
On that note, thank you for your time. Stay curious, stay connected.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.